Look, I just wanted to start off by absolutely acknowledging how hugely difficult this year has been for the industry. That this dry season has presented huge challenges, and we know going forward into the future, while the rain outlook for this area compared to the southwest is not as threatening. Certainly, the combination of later rains and high temperatures are going to continue to create a challenge for us all. So, look, we're really very, very, very concerned, very pleased to hear. And although it was mentioned that the wet may not kick in till January, it is being predicted by BOM that there will be, there's a good chance of a higher than normal rainfall this summer on this part of Northern Australia. So we look like we're going to be better placed than our friends in Queensland. But I just want to say we are absolutely with you, and I'll talk a little bit later about what the team is doing to work with the industry in this really challenging time. And if I just give a little, we know that there's more and more multipliers, and I think in Desiree's comments was recognising that the pastoral industry is a real job-creating industry. We think that there's more potential. I just this morning was talking to Rusty Cook, who I note is one of your sponsors here from Red Range stock feeds, and we were able to give a little bit of assistance through one of our grants programs to Rusty and his team, and they are expanding the number of jobs that are available to people in Kununurra quite significantly. And the more that we have those value-added businesses that are servicing and that are based up here in the Kimberley and the Pilbara that are serving the industry, the more we can see the great benefit, broader economic benefit that will come from having a strong, sustainable pastoral industry. So that is why I have been working over the last 2.5 years very hard to do what, and I think everyone knows that numerous governments have tried, and it does turn out to be a very difficult task. But this week we have the McGowan government has committed to a pastoral lands reform package. So we've now got lift off. Now we've still got some way to go. Obviously, we've got to get this thing through the Parliament. But I think this is going to be of considerable value to the industry, and I hope that we get real support for the industry, because at the end of the day, we know our friends at the PGA are strongly behind us. If we can get this group also supporting us, we will be able to get the political momentum to get this through the Parliament. So the idea of the pastoral lands reform, because it's for the entire pastoral estate, which compromises about 34% of the estate, is really to improve the condition of the pastoral estate, to foster best practice in land management, because I think people would understand there's a variety of standards to which we see pastoral lands managed, and also to encourage investment and diversification, because we clearly understand that modern pastoralism, really to be competitive in this age, there does have to be a lot of capital investment. There does have to be a lot more investment around watering, in particular, but in a whole range of ag tech solutions, and the tenure arrangements have been somewhat of an impediment to the scale of investment that we need. So we have been working closely with our team in our department with the Pastoral Lands Board and the lands people to develop this package. Okay, so I want to flick now, if I can flick over directly, Mark, to that. So The key measures are going to be the statutory right of pastoral lease renewal, subject to compliance with lease and other statutory conditions. So this means that when your lease expires, provided that you're compliant and you are engaged in an accreditation process, which I'll describe later, you will have the right of renewal. Now, this, I think, does constitute a very, very significant change for the industry and for and we think will result in an uplift in value. We will also legislate for the ability to increase the lease term to 50 years. Now, that will be obviously subject to there being a native title agreement, because that extension would constitute a future act. But for those pastoralists that are in the position to negotiate an ILUA, that will be available. And a third element in terms of the tenure is that diversification permits will run with the lease and not the lessee. At the moment, when you get a diversification permit, be it a tourism or one for crop circles, that you're not... that is personal to the lessee, and though whilst in most cases they are successfully transferred to a new lessee, it does create uncertainty as to what you actually have available on the market, and does obviously affect your valuation. So we think those are packages. These are issues that have come to us from the industry as being useful, and these are achievable. We believe that these will fit within our powers in terms of native title. So now, to get the first one, which is the pastoral right of renewal, I mean, obviously we want to make sure that there is the highest standard for that. There's the highest standard of sustainability on those properties. So if you want to get to be eligible for that, you have to opt in, and it's a voluntary opt-in, as opt-ins are, to the Land Management Accreditation System. And that accreditation system is really designed to capture best practice pastoral lands management technique. Now, that is that will be developed with the industry. We will have our team from the department, from lands, from the PLB, working with your representative groups to design this. And if people don't think that it's valuable, if they think it's too onerous, then the choice will be yours to stay with your current arrangements in relation to that. Those others, such as the change to diversification permits, they will continue regardless. So 3 elements. If you want to have that automatic right of renewal, you will need to sign on to the Land Accreditation System. And a system, we want this to work. We want it to be practical. We want it to be meaningful, but we want it to be something that is deeply practical. So it's not going to be dreamt up in Perth. It is going to be a system that will be worked through with your industry. But we do need to make sure that it really does represent best practice. But more generally, recognising that there will be some pastoralists that won't be opting into that, we do have an obligation to, as part of this system, an obligation in any event, to make sure that we are properly monitoring and establishing proper compliance in the rangelands. And I think probably a lot of you would be aware of an Auditor General's report that came out last year that reflected on what had happened in the previous 8 or so years, and said that there had just been an absence of any real monitoring, that there were no boots on the ground, there was no, the whole system of compliance had really become very skeletal, and that we were seeing many areas, and lots of them in the southern rangelands, but not exclusively, many of these areas going backwards. Now, you know, as a government, we can't allow that to happen. It's very bad for those communities, it's very bad for our environment, and we are determined, and it's bad for the economic future of the country, because as Desiree said, there is a lot of economic potential out there if we do this properly. So there will be, as part of this package, we'll be getting our act together and making sure there is an integrated risk-based land monitoring and compliance system that will be developed for the whole rangelands. But obviously, being risk-based, much of the effort will be focused on the those areas where we have the greatest percentage of lands that have been found to be in poor and degrading conditions. Now, there'll also be some changes to the powers, the enhanced enforcement powers from the Pastoral Lands Board. So people that aren't being compliant can be required to submit and implement a management plan, and we can remove order a specified number of stock to be removed. We've ensured that there is supposed to be a person with an environmental focus on the PLB, and that will be a person now nominated by the Minister for the Environment. We'll be connecting up convictions under the Animal Welfare Act, will be a breach of the lease, and a breach of any of the land management legislation, such as the Soil and Land Conservation Act, will also be a breach of the lease. Now, breach of the lease doesn't mean that the lease is automatically terminated, but it does put into play the continuing availability of the lease. If people aren't complying with the broader legal requirements, then the continuity of their lease will be under question. Now, I think this is really important for the industry, because we do know there are from time to time people out there that for whatever reason are not managing these leases properly, and that has the ability to undermine the credibility of the whole industry, and we certainly don't want that. There'll be some administrative reforms that will be streamlining the interagency permit approval processes. So we do recognise that the current system is incredibly clunky in terms of going through those approvals and going through the different agencies. So one of the administrative measures that will be enshrined in this package is getting an interagency permit approval process happening. We will be removing the requirement to obtain Pastoral Lands Board approval for agistements. That doesn't seem to be anything that adds value anymore. So that will be changing. We will change the annual date of return to the 30th of December. Apparently people have asked for that. And change the change of the rent review date. So they are. That's the essence of that package. I'd love to, and hopefully at the end of this, David, I think am I going to have some time for some questions, because I think people want to. I mean, there's so much that we could talk about, but I'm very conscious of your time. Now, and I know that the pastoral rent review is. Some people thought that maybe we should be putting this pastoral rent review into the pastoral lands reform. Look, I don't think that would be a good idea. We have been at work on this thing well before those due valuations came up, and I think that this would just delay the pastoral lands reform. Treasurer Ben Wyatt, and who's as Treasurer and as the Minister for the PLB, has said that he is totally committed to a rent review process. He's totally committed to ensuring that we have a system that is more transparent and gives people more notice. So that's going to, that review is currently underway. It will be looking at the full scope of implications to industry and government to consider the intersection of this with the pastoral lands reform that we're offering. And they are anticipating they'll have a sort of a paper available early 2020, and with a final sort of decision to be made mid next year. So that work is absolutely underway, and we're the next. And we'll be there well and truly before the next 5-yearly rent review in 2024. And I think we all need to understand that the amounts that we have been receiving in rents for this sizable part of the estate of the state are very modest. It's 2.6 million in 18-19. It'll be 3.1 million in 19-20. And to be honest, that doesn't really cover the administration. So I think we've just got to have that. We've got to understand that this is an area where we can't just go in and say we're going to cut rents, because already we have got a situation where we're not covering our basic administrative costs. But we do completely understand that the way that the time frames that have been scheduled, the amount of notice that industry gets is not acceptable, and we want to work with you to have a change in that system in place well and truly before the next rent review is due. So we've got, so where do we go from here? The general compliance, so this is the compliance that applies to everyone, the good land management guidelines, the development of those are underway, working with industry. We will be drafting the amendments to the Land Administration Act. We will have a draft bill out, hopefully in the first half of next year. And my aim is to have that into the Parliament in the first half of next year, and passed through both houses of Parliament by the end of next year. Earlier, obviously, if we can. But I think we all know, we've all seen, we've been particularly in this space. There have been so many times that we have had commitments, we've had attempts, genuine attempts being made, and they've all stalled at the last minute. There's a change of minister and the whole thing starts again. So I'm really keen for us not to dawdle around on this, but to get this done in this term of government. Now that's only going to happen. That's only going to happen if there is strong support from the industry. We have had this week strong support from, in principle, from the PGA, and we would be very much hoping that we will get the same support from your group, because at the end of the day, we are doing this because we think this is enhancing to your industry, that it is going to be able to put your industry on a more sustainable basis. Now, if this is not the path you want to go down, please let us know and we'll devote our energies elsewhere. But since we've come into government and I've got this portfolio, I've been very focused on trying to deliver something. It is a modest package. I know others have, aspirations for permanent tenure, and but we have to acknowledge what the realities are of our legal system, and what we can and can't do, and what is politically practical to achieve. We think that, as I say, it's a modest package, but we think it will constitute a real uplift in the in value. Now, this is probably, I suppose, the big thing that we want to talk to you about, but I just do want to also recognise the work that the department has been doing here, led by Rod Cossard. A fantastic work in the Northern Beef development. We've now got full-time extension officers devoted to the northern cattle industry based in Karratha, Broome and Kununurra. And we have been very much focusing on getting higher levels of more research back into the game, more extension to help you guys, but also more research. And I think you had some updates yesterday on our Mosaic Ag trials being undertaken, and we've got Clinton Revell and Chris Ham here. And that's a great example of the northern-based research proving up the agronomy of non-native fodder plants. And I know non-native fodder plants are very much in your focus, and we understand that, but we've got to make sure that we put the R&D in to make sure that they are safe and that they're not going to compromise the broader environmental values that we have. A bit further south, our Transforming Ag in the Pilbara is underway, and I think I know Chris Shelford presented on this yesterday. So we've the Fitzroy election commitments. We've made very clear commitments, and I want to thank the KPCA who have been very much part of our team and been very, very helpful in us working through what is an enormously difficult conundrum of how do we reconcile the cultural and social aspirations of the Indigenous community with the aspirations of the pastoralists and the views of the environmentalist, all who in a democracy have voices and have the right to be heard. Now, this is going to be a uniquely challenging issue, and we really do have to work together and try to get some sort of common ground where possible on how we do this and what is the extent to which we see development based on surface water and on groundwater. So that work is underway, and as I say, I do want to thank KPCA for the work that they've been, how they have been assisting us understanding that this cannot be a situation of one group imposing their will on the others. We really do have to try to get some common ground. That is proving to be very difficult, but we keep working on it. The dry seasons, I've met this before. I just want to say that the department has been absolutely focused on this now really since around May. And so our approach has been to make an assessment of where the most at risk properties are right across, not just the Kimberley and the Pilbara, but also the southern rangelands, and actually put boots on the ground, go out and talk to those pastoralists at risk. And my understanding, there's been around 100 visits in the last 4 months. So since July, there have been 100 pastoral stations where we've actually gone out and spoken to people, talked to them about what they need, what's likely to be coming at them, talking about what they need to do to ensure their compliance with the with animal welfare provisions, and linking them into other assistance that they might need for feed budgeting, etc. And also trying to get information out about what Commonwealth assistance is available to those people that are really finding hard to get the financial ends to meet. I mean, one of the things that I do note, and it probably doesn't apply so much here in the Kimberley, but out in the southern rangelands, there's lots of people really living on the edge economically. We only have 86 pastoralists and farmers in this state, 83, that are actually on the Commonwealth Government income assistance. In every other state, they have thousands of people that, and I put this down to lack of information coming through to our people about some of these assistance schemes, whether it's income supplementation, whether or not it's availability of rebates to upgrade water infrastructure, but we are determined to work and to make sure that all of those Commonwealth programs are well understood. And our effort is going out and talking to all of those people that are at risk and having forums. I understand, Rob, you've had a number of twilight forums, really just making sure that everything that we can possibly do in the way of assisting with knowledge, etc., is there. So there's many more things that we could talk about, but look, I think the big item obviously is this is quite as far as we're concerned, quite a big breakthrough that we've now got government agreeing to this reform package. And as I say, I think it is absolutely critical that if this is what you want, and we understood it was, that you really get behind it so we can get this through in the coming year. Just as I say, you see so often in agriculture, I mean, the number of bills and things that I'm dealing with that were first proposed in 2006 and limped on and got somewhere and then fell off the agenda. We've got to be very focused. You know, this is you're in a competitive environment where there's so many people wanting legislation up that we really have to know that industry is absolutely solidly behind us for us to go out and fight for that space within the Parliament over the next year to get it through. So I think I would, David, if it's okay, whilst there's many, many more things that we could talk about that I'd love to talk about, I'd just say that, that we're really talking to you about this and how we can take this forward. Thank you. Yeah, that's...
You'd have to agree that the growing of pasture in seasons like this on property pasture is one hell of an advantage. You've had a look around and whatnot, and I just believe that this area, without wrecking it, I'm talking about the Fitzroy Valley now, without wrecking it, can go ahead and develop cropping, pasture. I think of getting into silage where you could be stacking away silage, maybe 10, 20,000 tonne of silage underground for years like this. And I think it's the way to go.
Yeah, and I think, Phil, thanks, that what I was saying, I really do, when I was talking about recognising that modern pastoralism did need big investment, and very much part of that is elements of irrigated agriculture for fodder production. Now, we've obviously got to get that balance right because, part of the whole pastoral estate is to preserve a natural environment, but we totally recognise that there's got to be irrigated agriculture is going to increasingly become part of modern pastoralism. And one of the things that we are seeing with climate change is that there is greater unpredictability in the seasons. And we're also looking obviously at the quality of the product that we are producing and the quality that's going up around the world, and that we have to have animals that are in good condition to continue to sell into those markets. So we agree. It's the issue is always going to be the extent to which we do that and how we can do that. And as I say, you've got to bear in mind the framework that we are living in, the framework within the WIC decision, wherein a pastoral lease does not extinguish native title. And so provided this is for pastoral activities and it can be accommodated. So this is a balancing game. There's, broader environmental considerations too. But it is making sure that we still fit within that framework. But no doubt about it, irrigated agriculture is going to be an absolutely essential part of, I think, certainly up in the Kimberley and probably more widely.
Thanks. Further questions?
Oh, God, guys, I mean, I've fought for 2.5 years to get this legislation up, and there's, come on, show a bit of enthusiasm.
Well, did you want to expand on the accreditation process and what might be involved in that? Because that will be a key part of the whole package, I think.
Yeah, and look, precisely what this looks like is something that, you know, we're absolutely committed to working through with industry. But some of the other stuff, obviously, exists outside this. So you won't, in effect, be worse off because if you find the accreditation process too onerous, well, then you just stay with the existing arrangement. But I think as we're looking at, you know, you're looking at your markets that you are wanting to go into, there's going to be more and more requirements for there to be, you know, provenance ratings, sustainability ratings. In fact, in my view, this whole system of this accreditation system is actually going to make it, you know, provide a really good framework for the industry to be able to get some very big ticks that are going to help penetrate, particularly those export markets, and you know, to have some diversity of options, being able to, you know, things like Bruce is doing. I mean, obviously with Wagyu, not everyone's going to go into Wagyu, but you know, the whole credential around grass-fed beef, the whole credential around a product that is, you know, antibiotic free, etc. All of those things can be, you know, I guess, seen as part of an accreditation system that is going to actually add market value. Because you just look at, you know, where markets are going, and like it or not, you know, food evangelism is out there, and particularly in in Australia, we're not going to be the food bowl of Asia, but we are going to be a supplier of possibly the top half of that market. We'll be looking at a premium product, a product that has that environmental accreditation. So whilst you're probably seeing it, David, as a barrier, in a sense, going through this process is going to be something that will value adding. Can I just put an example? I remember these many years ago, we've been with some Rio and BHP executives, and they were talking about, like, you know, how the vastly improved rules around dog health and safety at first were a real pain, and they just saw this as this incredible cost burden. But they came to realise that what it did is it made them actually understand the detail of their business much more. And they actually had to analyse their business more closely. And as a result, not only did they help save people's lives and limbs, but they actually were able to affect a whole range of cost savings because they were forced to look into the detail in a way that they hadn't been before. So I wouldn't be seeing this as a burden. I would be seeing this as something that offers a great opportunity. And, you know, our agencies will want to work to produce something that you can then, as I say, leverage off in export markets.
Okay, any further questions? I'll give it to Em.
No, well, we always want to hear from the women too.
Wait for the mic.
Yeah, Emma Salerno, KPCA. Just wanting some clarity. You've talked about the rangeland deficiencies or the animal welfare breach triggering animal welfare offences triggering breaches to the lease.
Okay, so you might know that there's been some quite well-known cases in the north in the last year, and one of the things that that became evident that it was unclear that those sort of breaches actually constitute a breach of the lease, you know, and so we're making that making that clear. I mean, no, we're not saying, every time you, if there's a finding that you've done something wrong with, a head of cattle, we're going to breach your lease. I mean, that's not the case. But if we're seeing systemic failure to take care of the animals, and it has over the years been on a number of stations, then either the imposition of new conditions on the lease as part, like a breach, doesn't mean that you automatically lose it, but it does give us the right to then go in and say, well, we're going to impose these new conditions on your lease because you have actually breached the lease, and if you don't agree to these new, maybe a management plan for animals, we will have this other sanction of removing or reducing your lease. And I think, and as I said, it's not about, running in there every time there's been an incident, but where we see systemic failure, we need to have that as an option. We need to say to people, well, look, if you've got to understand that your job is to actually make sure these animals are reasonably cared for, and if that is failing systemically, then we need to address that. Yeah. Obviously, the detail of how that would work, and there's a sense of, obviously, of proportionality that would need to be applied. Some of that detail we can bring out in the drafting of the bill, and as I said, we will bring the draft bill back we will bring the draft bill back. But at the end of the day, in order for us to be able to give this, which, this package will constitute an uplift in value to pastoralists, there has to be a quid pro quo, right? That is, as Trumpy would say, there's always got to be something for, you never get anything for nothing. But our intention is not to do that, and that will be something that we will give attention to in the drafting of the bill. We'll bring the bill back to the industry to make sure that everyone is happy with the format and that. But that sense of proportionality will absolutely be very much part of it.
Did you want to just give us an idea of the timing on when all that might happen?
Yes, look, there's a huge backlog of drafting. We're trying to circumvent that backlog. If we're successful, we would like to see something being drafted over the next 3 to 4 months, get that to the industry, say, the beginning of the second quarter of next year. Once we have sign-off on that, then hopefully get that into the Parliament in the first half of next year, with the aim of getting it through in the second half of the year. But at the end of the day, if we're not getting fulsome, strong support from the industry, it's not going to go anywhere. We're not going to bother putting it in the queue. It's the political capital that's being expended to do this. We need to get a very clear statement, which it's been talked about since we came in, that we needed to do something. There have been attempts before that have been, shall we say, more courageous attempts. Bigger reform hasn't been deliverable. I think this is a modest set of reforms, and we think they are deliverable, but it's going to be in your court, because without an element of enthusiastic engagement, it will not break through that queue of things that need to be done.
Thanks. Are there any further questions? Do you want? Phil can't help himself.
Yeah, Kevin Brockers from Larrawa. Now, you talked about the water allocations before, and also we see that you're not going to have any dam on any of the tributaries on the Fitzroy. So have they all got to go to bores, or are you going to put barrages across the river, or how are you going to allocate this water?
Okay, so look, this is so without the barrages across the river, there's still stream flow as well as groundwater. Now, where the discussions and debate are still at is how we deal with that surface water, where you get the overflow, and there's I think there's figures of, in a good season, a couple of thousand gigalitres of surface water flows over the land. Now, we're trying to get some sort of consensus emerging about what percentage of that surface water that we can utilise, and there is strong debate about it. And this is what I say, we've really got to work with the Indigenous interests in particular to see if we can come up with a formula that people are happy with. At the moment, we thought we were making progress. That is proving harder. I mean, there is obviously, quite independent of that, there are the groundwater supplies, which, as you indicate, do require bores. And we understand that is more expensive, but we do know that with the renewable energy capability, the energy that you need to pump these things up, that probably the economics of some of this are changing fairly rapidly if we can get these powered by renewable systems, and of course, being the groundwater supply. They are less susceptible to short-term seasonal variation in the availability. So whilst absolutely understanding the desire to capture the surface flow, how much of that we're going to be able to do, it's not clear.
Okay, how are we going for time? Phil, do you want to have another go?
Anyone interested in pastoral land reform? No?
This one's a little bit out of left field. It's a relationship between pastoralism and national parks. These two groups are going to have to get closer together because you've got vermin control and public risk. There's a whole grey area running between national parks and the pastoral world. And that's something you need to have ticking over in the back of your mind. That really does need sorting. They need to be on the same page, particularly with pest control. And you mentioned pigs, and you mentioned swine fever, and a whole raft of things out there where you've got a boundary and you've got two distinct jurisdictions about who's handling what and when. And that's something we need to get sorted out over the next foreseeable future.
Yeah, and look, it's not and as I said, there's not a lot of money coming in from the pastoral lessees the pastoral leases in a direct sense to put to this. One of the things that we are, but we do recognise that issue in some areas. We have given extra money to regional biosecurity groups to help them deal with that. I don't think it's such a problem up here, but we have been putting extra money into large herbivore control. And I just have to say, I do think nationally, and I think in the state, we're massively underdone in our way in which we're dealing with feral animals. I do think that the destructiveness that we see of feral cats, feral pigs, camels, horses, you know, and I'd be the first to recognise, I mean, we're putting some more money into this to try to deal with it, but it is a massive problem. Now, one of the creative solutions that for just one issue is the camels. So one of the things that we have been working hard on is, as part of what we're trying to do for the pastoral industry, although again it's probably more based on the southern rangelands, is carbon credits, carbon farming. Now there is a proposal being looked at that shooting of camels, that for the death of every camel reduces massively methane emissions, and that therefore there should be carbon credits. So if we can actually find a way in which there's economic value in going out there and shooting camels, that of course will assist us. But feral animals, huge problem. There's not unlimited money in government. We've tried through the RBSs, which is where landowners get together with the state and joint fund it. But it's always been the case that pastoralists get aggrieved that they don't believe enough has been done on public lands. Now, we've got lots of things that we've got to spend our money on, and we are trying to find more to deal with ferals. It's a big problem, and probably has to be dealt with too at a national level. And I noted there was a $19 million, I think, camel project that went on federally around 2008 to 2012, and some of these things probably have to be done in a much more serious way than we're currently doing them.